The wrong decision that still haunts me is choosing to work night shifts while leaving Ava with Thomas. That's the one thing I wish I could undo. It's the decision that keeps tearing me apart. I keep replaying every detail in my mind, trying to figure out when I should have seen the signs, when I should have listened, especially to my 4-year-old daughter who literally begged me not to go every single night. We needed the income. That's what I kept telling myself. The hospital paid night nurses significantly more, and Thomas had just been laid off from his accounting job. It was supposed to be temporary, just until he found something else. He said he was applying, but nothing ever came through. What started as a few months turned into over a year. At first, Ava seemed okay with the arrangement. She had always been a daddy's girl, anyway. But then something shifted. I can't even pinpoint exactly when, maybe 3 months into the night shifts. I'd start getting ready to leave around 10 p.m., and she'd begin crying. Not the usual toddler tears, but full-body sobs that made my chest ache. She'd cling to my legs, screaming, "Mommy, don't go! Please don't leave me with Daddy!" Thomas would always brush it off. "She's just being dramatic. She calms down right after you leave. She's trying to manipulate you. She wants attention." And like a fool, I believed him. I told myself it was just separation anxiety. Every parenting article said that was normal. I'd kneel down and promise Ava that I'd be back in the morning, that Daddy would take care of her, that she was safe. But she never believed me. Her little fingers would grip my arms so tightly they'd leave marks. Her face would be blotchy and red from screaming. The last image I'd have each night was Thomas peeling her off me, her tiny body kicking and crying as I shut the door behind me. Eventually, I started dreading work. I'd sit in the car and cry for 10 minutes before driving to the hospital. My coworkers noticed. Sophie, another nurse on my floor, kept checking in, asking if things were okay at home. I'd just wave it off. Yeah, my kid's just having a rough patch. But then Ava started having accidents again, even though she'd been fully potty trained for more than a year. She'd wake up from nightmares she couldn't describe. She started hiding, in closets, under her bed, behind furniture. I'd find her curled up in those spots, completely silent, not playing, just hiding. I confronted Thomas once, asked if anything unusual happened during the nights that might be scaring her. He immediately got defensive, accused me of implying he was a bad father. He twisted everything, made it about me, said I was the one abandoning them every night. He turned it on me so fast my head spun, and I backed off, because that's what I always did with Thomas. Then Ava started getting bruises, nothing big, just little ones on her arms and legs. Thomas always had a story. She fell off the swing, bumped the coffee table, roughhoused with the neighbor's kid. I'm a nurse. I should have recognized the signs, but I was exhausted, working 12-hour shifts, trying to parent during the day, keeping everything from falling apart. I wanted to believe him, because the alternative was too terrifying. But 3 weeks ago, Ava stopped being willing to be alone with him at all, not just at night. If I went to the bathroom, she'd follow me. If I tried to run a quick errand, she'd have a meltdown. She started sleeping in my bed during the day while I tried to nap before work. One afternoon, while she was napping beside me, Thomas came in and said we needed to talk about her behavior. He said she was becoming too dependent on me, that I was enabling it by letting her sleep in our bed. He said he was going to start being firmer with her. The tone of his voice made my skin crawl. That night was the worst. Ava cried so hard she made herself throw up. When I tried to leave, she kept screaming, "Don't leave me, Mommy. Please don't leave me. He hurts me when you're gone. He hurts me." Thomas snatched her up and told her to stop lying. His expression, I don't even know how to describe it. He was smiling at me, but his eyes, they were something else entirely. He told me to go, said he'd handle it, that she was overtired, looking for attention, making up stories. I almost stayed home. I almost called in sick. But we needed the money, and I'd already missed too many shifts. So I left. I left while my little girl was begging me not to. I couldn't concentrate at work. I kept messing up, dropping things, forgetting basic procedures. Around 3 a.m., Sophie pulled me aside and told me to take a break. I sat in the staff room and broke down, told her everything. She listened, Then she asked one question that flipped everything on its head. Have you checked your nanny cam? We had a baby monitor system Thomas had installed. When Ava was a baby, the monitor was synced to our Wi-Fi and stored everything to the cloud. I hadn't checked it in forever, she wasn't a baby anymore, but Sophie's question hit me like a truck. Right there in the hospital break room at 3:30 in the morning, I logged into the app. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type the password. The camera was still set up in Ava's room, angled at her bed. The footage from that night showed her room empty at first, then Thomas walking in with her in his arms. She was still crying, though it was quieter, like she'd run out of strength. He laid her down and just stood there for a while, too long staring at her. Then he sat on the edge of her bed and started talking. I couldn't hear what he was saying. The audio was muted, and I couldn't find my earbuds. But I could see Ava's face, saw her shrinking back, pressing herself into the wall, saw Thomas reach out toward her. My heart was pounding so hard I thought I might pass out. I fumbled with the app, trying to unmute it, but my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I watched as he leaned in close to her, his back to the camera. She was crying again, shaking her head no, over and over. Then I saw him pull back the covers, and the app crashed. My phone completely froze. I restarted it, but when I tried to log back in, it said my password was incorrect. Again and again, it wouldn't work. I called our landline. No one answered. Sophie found me hyperventilating in the break room and helped calm me down, just enough to think. I called our neighbor, an older woman who keeps a spare key for emergencies, and begged her to check on Ava. 10 minutes later, she called me back, said everything seemed fine, said Thomas had answered the door and told her Ava was sleeping peacefully, that I was just stressed and imagining things. I couldn't wait. I left work early and drove home like a maniac. It was nearly 5 a.m. when I pulled up. The house was dark, quiet. Thomas was asleep in our bed. I went straight to Ava's room, empty. I tore through the house, checking all her hiding places, finally finding her curled up in the bathtub of the guest bathroom, clutching her favorite stuffed animal. She was fast asleep. When I picked her up, she screamed. It took me minutes to get her calm enough to recognize me. When she did, she collapsed into my arms, sobbing, clinging to me, whispering, "Mommy," over and over. I put her in the car and drove to Sophie's place. She'd given me her address before I left the hospital. Ava fell back asleep during the drive. I carried her inside, and Sophie set us up in her spare room. I don't know what to do. Thomas has been calling nonstop, leaving voicemails saying he's worried sick, asking where we are, threatening to call the police, claiming I've lost it, that I'm having some sort of breakdown and need help. Sophie says I should take Ava to the hospital to be examined. But I'm terrified. What if they find nothing? What if Thomas convinces them I'm unstable? What if they give her back to him? And what if they do find something? How do I live with the fact that I left my daughter with a monster, night after night while she begged me not to go? Right now, Ava is napping in Sophie's guest room. She hasn't let me out of her sight all day. She flinches at every noise, keeps whispering, "Does Daddy know where we are?" I have to figure out what comes next. Police? Hospital? My parents live 3 states away. Maybe we could go there. But Thomas would know. That's the first place he'd check. The worst part is this tiny voice inside me still wondering, what if I'm wrong? What if I'm overreacting? What if Ava really was just having nightmares? What if Thomas is right, and I'm unraveling from exhaustion and stress? But then I remember her face on that footage, that terror. That wasn't just fear. No child acts like that over nothing. I have to recover that video somehow. I need proof. I need to know exactly what he did while I was walking out the door every night, trying to believe she'd be okay. The decision to work night shifts and leave Ava with Thomas, that's the one I can't undo. That's the one keeping me up tonight, watching her sleep, jumping at every sound, wondering if he's going to find us. What do I even do now? First, thank you to everyone who commented on my last post. I never expected it to blow up the way it did. I'm sitting in Sophie's bathroom now, typing this while Ava finally sleeps. It's been 48 hours since we left the house, and things have only gotten worse. The morning after we stayed at Sophie's, I decided to take Ava to the children's hospital, not the one where I work. I knew Thomas would look there first. Sophie drove us to one across town. I was terrified the entire ride, checking the rearview mirror constantly, convinced we were being followed. Ava wouldn't let go of my hand the whole way, kept asking, "Is Daddy coming to get me?" But it wasn't the kind of question a child asks when they miss their parent. At the hospital, I told them I was worried about potential abuse. I had to speak in code at first because Ava was right there with me. The triage nurse picked up on it immediately and took us back quickly. They have special procedures for these kinds of situations. A child life specialist came and took Ava to play while I sat down with the doctor, Dr. Benson. She was incredibly kind, not judgmental at all, even when I broke down crying, trying to explain everything. I told her about the night shifts, the screaming, the hiding, the nanny cam footage I half saw before it vanished. She asked if Ava had ever said anything specific about what Thomas did to her. I told her no, just that he hurt her and gave her bad dreams. Dr. Benson said that was actually common. Kids often don't have the language to describe what's happening to them. The hospital had to notify their special response team. A social worker named Michael came in. He had this soft voice and tired eyes like he'd witnessed far too much. There was also a detective. They interviewed me separately while a pediatrician examined Ava. The whole time, I kept wondering if I was doing the right thing, if I was overreacting, if I was spiraling, if I was about to blow up all our lives over something that might not even be real. When the pediatrician came back, I stopped breathing. She told me there were no clear signs of sexual abuse or major trauma, but Ava had some troubling bruises on her upper arms and back. The pattern was consistent with being grabbed harshly. There was also a small burn on her inner thigh, which Ava wouldn't explain. It wasn't the smoking gun I'd hoped for, not enough to definitively say Thomas had harmed her. But it was something. The doctor said the bruises were suspicious, especially in combination with Ava's behavior. That's when everything went off the rails. Thomas showed up at the hospital. I still don't know how he found us. Maybe he called every hospital in town. Maybe he tracked my phone. I don't know. But suddenly there he was in the waiting area, talking to the front desk, looking panicked, concerned, like the perfect heartbroken father. I was in a consultation room with Michael and the detective when a nurse came in and said Ava's father had arrived and was insisting on seeing her. My whole body went cold. Michael went out to speak with him while the detective stayed with me. I could hear Thomas's voice echoing down the hall, loud, upset. He was saying I had taken Ava without permission, that I'd been unstable for weeks, that he was deeply worried about our safety. The detective turned and looked at me carefully. He asked if there was any truth to what Thomas was saying, asked if I had permission to take Ava, asked if I had a history of mental health issues. I tried to explain, but even to my own ears it sounded unhinged. Yes, I took Ava without telling Thomas. Yes, I'd been exhausted and overwhelmed from work. Yes, I left my shift early. Yes, Thomas had always seemed like a loving father until recently. Yes, Ava had been acting out. No, I didn't have solid proof. Only a glimpse of something horrifying on a nanny cam I couldn't access anymore. Then Michael came back in. He had that stiff, worried look on his face. He said Thomas had already filed a police report for kidnapping that morning when he woke up and found us gone. He said Thomas had brought medical records, ones that showed I'd been prescribed sleep medication last year, claimed I'd been having paranoid thoughts, mood swings, that I was unwell. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. How did he even have my medical records? Yes, I'd been prescribed Ambien last year, but only took it a few times. It made me feel groggy, so I stopped. I never told any doctor I was paranoid. He must have accessed my patient portal somehow, or just made it up. I couldn't even think straight. Michael said they'd need to interview Ava alone. It was standard protocol. I just nodded, numb. They wouldn't let Thomas see her yet either, not while she was being assessed. While Ava was with the team, Thomas was allowed to speak with me, under supervision, with both Michael and the detective in the room. He walked in looking normal, calm, concerned. slightly heartbroken, but composed. I barely recognized him. This wasn't the man I'd seen leaning over Ava in that video. He sat across from me, did that thing with his eyes like he was fighting back tears. Said he was so relieved we were okay. Said he'd been out of his mind with worry. Asked why I'd left with Ava in the middle of the night. Asked what was going on with me. I just stared. I couldn't say anything. The detective asked about the bruises on Ava's arms, the burn on her thigh. Thomas didn't even blink. Said she'd fallen at the park last week, on the monkey bars. Pulled up pictures on his phone from last Saturday, showing Ava playing. Said the burn likely happened when she was helping him make breakfast. That she accidentally touched a hot pan, even had a photo of them flipping pancakes together Sunday morning. His voice got all soft and emotional, talking about their daddy-daughter breakfast tradition. And just like that, he had an answer for everything. All of it sounded perfectly reasonable. He had it all documented, casual photos a normal dad would take. It made me look like the unstable one. Then Thomas pulled out his phone and showed them a copy of the nanny cam footage from the night before, the very footage I couldn't access anymore. My heart stopped cold. The video showed exactly what I'd started to see. Thomas walking into Ava's room, sitting on her bed. But then it kept going. Showed him tucking her in, reading her a bedtime story. Ava was still crying a little, but she gradually settled down. He kissed her forehead, turned off the light, and left the room. Everything looked normal, innocent. I felt like I was losing my mind. That wasn't what I saw. That wasn't what happened. He must have edited it or swapped the file or something, but how could I prove it? How do I explain that the footage he has isn't what I saw start to unfold before the app crashed? Thomas told them I'd been under intense stress for months. Said he'd been begging me to cut back on my hours. Said he was worried I was experiencing a breakdown. And then, he actually started crying. Said he just wanted to help me get better, that he wanted our family to be whole again. Michael and the detective exchanged a look, one I couldn't read. Then Ava came back into the room with a female officer. The second she saw Thomas, she froze in the doorway, completely froze. And then she bolted toward me, climbed into my lap, buried her face in my shoulder, and wouldn't even glance at him. That had to mean something, didn't it? The detective noticed. I saw it. But Thomas just looked heartbroken and said, "See? This is what I've been talking about. She's feeding off your anxiety. You've made her afraid of me." They asked to speak to Ava alone again. I didn't want to let her go, but they insisted. Thomas and I were put in separate rooms. I texted Sophie with trembling hands to update her. She offered to come back to the hospital, but I told her to stay away. I didn't want Thomas turning his attention to her, too. It felt like hours passed. Finally, Michael came back in. He said Ava wasn't disclosing any abuse, said she was confused and scared, said she talked about nightmares but wouldn't or couldn't describe them, said she missed her daddy but was also afraid of him. His exact words were, "We don't have enough to substantiate abuse allegations at this time." It hit like a punch to the chest. I must have made some sort of sound, because Michael quickly added that they were still taking the situation seriously, that the investigation wasn't over, they'd be conducting home visits, they wanted us in family counseling. But then he said something that made my blood go cold. He said that, under the circumstances, they were concerned about my mental state, about my judgment, said that if I continued making unsupported accusations or tried to keep Ava from Thomas, I could risk losing custody myself. Thomas was allowed to see Ava briefly, with supervision. He didn't push when she refused to hug him, just spoke softly, told her he missed her, asked if she was ready to come home. She looked at me with these wide, terrified eyes, and I felt something inside me just crack. Somehow, we ended up with this surreal compromise. Ava and I could stay elsewhere temporarily while the investigation continued, but I had to disclose our location. Thomas would have supervised visits starting the next day. Family counseling would begin next week. I had to return to work, or take formal leave, and I wasn't allowed to leave the state. It was either that or face an emergency custody hearing, one where Thomas would likely get temporary custody due to what they called my erratic behavior, and lack of hard evidence. So now we're back at Sophie's. I had to tell Thomas where we were. He knows her address. He's coming tomorrow at 2 p.m. for his first supervised visit. Michael will be here to monitor it, but I'm still terrified. Ava is finally asleep, after crying herself out. She made me check under the bed, in the closet, behind the shower curtain. Made me promise I wouldn't leave. She wrapped her little fingers around mine and held on as she drifted off. I've been combing through my phone, trying to figure out how Thomas could have accessed my medical records, or tampered with the nanny cam footage. That's when I found it. He'd installed a family locator app on my phone months ago. Said it was for emergencies. That must be how he tracked us to the hospital. I deleted it immediately, but I also found something worse. Text messages, dozens of them, conversations with my mom, friends, ones where I supposedly said I was overwhelmed, paranoid, having mood swings, but I never had those conversations. Never sent those texts. Some of them date back almost a year. Some are time-stamped for hours I know I was working or sleeping. I don't even know how he did it. But they're there. Now I'm scared to fall asleep. Scared Thomas will somehow get in. Scared they'll take Ava away. Scared that no one will believe me, because I can barely believe myself anymore. That footage he showed, it looked so normal. What if I imagined it? What if I really am having some kind of breakdown? But then Ava whimpers in her sleep, and I know. I know what I saw starting to unfold on that camera. I know my daughter. I know she's terrified of her father. And it's not for nothing. Sophie says I need a lawyer. Says this is already far beyond anything we can handle on our own. She has a friend who's a family attorney and is planning to call her tomorrow. But lawyers cost money, and Thomas still controls all of our shared accounts. I do have a personal account, a bit of savings, but not much. I checked my work email earlier. There's already a formal warning for leaving my shift early. My supervisor wants a meeting tomorrow to discuss recent performance concerns I didn't even know existed. There are complaint forms dating back weeks about medication errors I never made, notes about patient interactions that never happened. I feel like I'm drowning, like everything I thought was stable is actually quicksand, and the more I fight, the deeper I sink. And still, there's that voice. The one whispering, maybe he's right. Maybe you are losing it. Maybe you saw something that wasn't there. But then I look at Ava's bruises, the small circular burn on her inner thigh that looks nothing like an accidental brush with a pan, the way she flinches when doors slam, the way she whispers, "Please don't make me go with Daddy." I don't know what to do. I don't know who to trust. Thomas has twisted everything so thoroughly that I'm questioning my own reality. The very systems that are supposed to protect Ava are watching me now just as closely as they're watching him. I'm going to try to get some sleep while Ava's still out. But I'm dreading tomorrow, dreading the supervised visit, dreading what comes next. If anyone reading this has been through anything like this, please tell me what to do. Tell me how to fight someone who's already convinced everyone you're the unstable one. Tell me how to protect a child when no one believes there's anything to protect her from. And if anyone knows how to recover deleted nanny cam footage, or prove that messages were sent from your phone by someone else, please tell me. That might be our only chance. It's been 4 days since my last update. I'm writing this from a hospital chair, watching Ava sleep, hooked up to monitors. Everything has spun so far out of control that I can barely think straight. The supervised visit with Thomas happened. Michael, the social worker, arrived at Sophie's apartment 30 minutes early to walk me through the process. Said he'd be present the entire time, that he'd step in if needed, but the goal was to observe a natural interaction, to establish a baseline of their relationship. Ava had been having panic attacks all morning, not tantrums, real panic attacks, hyperventilating, unable to breathe. I had to hold her like a toddler, rocking her back and forth, trying to soothe her. She kept saying she didn't want to see Daddy, that she didn't want the bad dreams again. When Michael arrived, she ran and hid under Sophie's bed and refused to come out. It took 20 minutes of coaxing just to get her into the living room. Michael saw it all, took notes. That has to matter, right? A child that terrified isn't just pretending. Thomas showed up exactly at 2 p.m. Looked like the picture-perfect dad. Clean-shaven, carrying Ava's favorite stuffed bunny she'd left at home. Had this soft, comforting smile on his face that made my skin crawl because I knew it wasn't real. Michael introduced himself officially and laid out the rules. 2-hour visit. He would remain present the whole time. No physical discipline. Respect Ava's boundaries. Ava was glued to my side on the couch. When Thomas walked in, she went completely still. Not crying, not talking, just frozen, like a rabbit watching a fox. The first hour was torture. Thomas sat on the floor, trying to get Ava to engage. She refused to move from my side. I tried not to show how badly I wanted to grab her and leave. Michael kept observing, quietly taking notes. Thomas suggested Ava show him her temporary bedroom. Said maybe he could read her a story there. Ava shook her head violently. Michael stepped in, gently saying that it might be better to stay in the living room for now. That transitions could be hard for kids during stressful situations. And then Thomas said something that made my blood run cold. He looked right at Ava and said, "Remember our special game? The one where you're the princess in the tower." "I have a new story about the princess I could tell you." Ava started trembling. Her entire body was shaking. She whispered, "No games. No princess games." I turned to Thomas and asked, "What princess game are you talking about?" He just smiled and said it was a bedtime story thing they did when I worked night shifts. Stories about a princess locked in a tower who had to be very quiet, or the dragon would hear her. Michael asked Ava if she liked the princess stories. She shook her head, still trembling. Michael made another note. Halfway through the visit, I had to use the bathroom. I didn't want to leave Ava, but I couldn't hold it anymore. I told Michael I'd be right back. Ava clung to me, panicking, and Thomas leaned in and said softly, "It's okay, sweetheart. Daddy was here. Nothing bad would happen." That's what Thomas said to Ava as I left the room. I was gone 2 minutes, 3 tops. I rushed back as fast as I could. When I came in, Ava was still on the couch, but something had changed. She was sitting perfectly upright, her back stiff, hands folded neatly in her lap, eyes locked on the floor. Completely silent. Thomas was across the room, chatting casually with Michael, as if nothing had happened. I rushed over to Ava, knelt in front of her, asked if she was okay. She didn't respond, didn't even glance at me, just stared at the floor with this vacant, hollow look. When I touched her shoulder, she flinched, so hard she nearly fell off the couch. Michael noticed right away and hurried over. He knelt beside her and asked what had happened. Ava wouldn't say a word, wouldn't look at anyone, just kept still and silent. Thomas looked the part, concerned, composed. He suggested maybe she was just overtired, asked gently if we should end the visit early. As soon as Thomas walked out the door, Ava collapsed into my arms, sobbing, but she still wouldn't say what had happened in the 2 minutes I'd been gone. Michael stayed for another hour, gently trying to coax her to talk, but she refused. The only thing she said, over and over, was, "No princess games." That night, Ava refused to sleep, wouldn't even lie down. She sat in the corner of Sophie's guest room, back to the wall, watching the door like she expected it to open at any moment. She finally passed out around 4 a.m. from sheer exhaustion. When I tried to lift her into bed, she woke up screaming. The next morning, Sophie helped me find a lawyer, someone who could meet with me that same afternoon. Ava was still nearly catatonic, barely speaking, jumping at every sound. I didn't want to leave her, but Sophie promised she'd stay right beside her the whole time. She swore Ava wouldn't be alone, not even for a second. The lawyer's name was Miguel. He was older, wore thick glasses, and had these kind, steady eyes. He let me tell the whole story without interrupting once. When I finished, he sat in silence for a long moment, then finally said, "You're being systematically gaslit." He explained it all, how Thomas was building a false medical history, tampering with digital evidence, framing me as unstable. Said this was textbook behavior for someone planning a custody grab. and that most abusers start setting up that narrative months, even years, in advance. When I asked what we could do, Miguel was honest. Without hard proof, it's your word against his, he said. And right now, he's built a paper trail that makes your word look weak. He told me we needed to shift focus to Ava, help her feel safe enough to open up, get her evaluated by specialists experienced in child trauma. That was the only way we might get real evidence. I must have looked completely defeated because Miguel leaned forward and added, "But here's the thing. Something doesn't add up. If Thomas is trying to look like the better parent, to make you seem unstable, why is he doing things that visibly terrify Ava? An experienced manipulator would be more careful. It's almost like he wants her afraid, or maybe he can't help himself." Then he paused mid-thought and asked what Thomas had done for work before being laid off. I told him he'd been an accountant at some firm. Miguel asked if Thomas had ever been investigated at work or left under unusual circumstances. I said not that I knew of, but I realized then I only knew what Thomas had told me. On my way back to Sophie's, my supervisor called. She said she'd been trying to get in touch and we needed to discuss my employment status immediately. Her tone was distant. All business, not at all like the woman who'd been at my baby shower 3 years ago. She said there had been multiple complaints, claims that I'd made medication errors, arrived to shifts impaired, lies, fabricated nonsense. I tried to explain, but she cut me off. I was suspended, pending investigation. She said they'd been lenient because of my previously spotless record, but the recent incidents were too serious to ignore. I was to turn in my badge immediately. I was still trying to process that call when I got back to Sophie's. She was sitting on the couch, looking stunned. Ava was finally napping, curled up after being awake for nearly 24 straight hours. Sophie said something had happened while I was gone. She'd been sitting with Ava, trying to coax her into eating something, when Ava suddenly asked, "Is the princess game real or pretend?" Sophie, not knowing what she meant, told her she didn't know about any princess game. Ava stared at her for a long moment and then whispered, "If I tell about the tower and the dragon will burn everyone up. Daddy said so." Sophie asked gently, "What happened in the tower?" Ava shut down, curled into a ball on the couch, and didn't speak again. Eventually, she fell asleep. I called Miguel right away. He said that what Ava said counted as a significant disclosure, and we needed to document it. He urged me to bring her back to the children's hospital, said to ask for the same team if possible. He reminded me not to lead her with questions, just to keep creating safe spaces for her to talk. So I brought her back. Dr. Benson was on shift and recognized us immediately. I explained what happened during the supervised visit and what Ava had said to Sophie about the princess game. Dr. Benson's face went still. Her expression darkened. Dr. Benson made a few calls and quickly brought back the same team from before. This time they included a child psychologist who specialized in trauma. Ava still wasn't very verbal, but the whispers about the princess game, the tower, the dragon, they returned. The psychologist gently asked if Ava could draw a picture of the princess game. She refused at first, curling in on herself. Then, without warning, she nodded and asked for crayons. What she drew made my heart stop. A stick figure girl, small and alone, in what looked like a closet or cramped space. Outside the closet, a much larger figure, surrounded by chaotic red scribbles. Ava had pressed the red crayon so hard it tore through the paper in several places. The psychologist pointed to the figures and asked who they were. Ava pointed to the small one, Princess. Then the large one, Dragon. Then, in a voice so low I barely caught it, she added, "But sometimes Daddy is the dragon." They asked if she could say more about the game, but she went blank again, just that empty, faraway stare. The psychologist gave the signal to stop. As we were leaving the interview room, Ava suddenly doubled over and threw up. At first, they thought it was from stress, but it didn't stop. She kept vomiting. Her skin was hot. Dr. Benson checked her temperature, 103.4, way too high. They admitted her immediately and began tests. Something was wrong, an infection, but they couldn't pinpoint the cause. She was put on IV antibiotics as they waited for more results. That's when Thomas showed up. Somehow he knew Ava had been hospitalized. He stormed into her room, demanding to know what was going on. I lost it, started yelling for him to get out. Security was called. Michael showed up. The whole situation spiraled. In the middle of the chaos, Ava had a seizure. I stood there frozen as her tiny body convulsed on the hospital bed, nurses and doctors rushing in from all sides. I don't think I'll ever get that image out of my mind. They stabilized her, but she had to be moved to intensive care. The infection wasn't responding to antibiotics. The doctors were baffled. They started trying different medications, running broader tests. They couldn't figure out how or why she was so sick. When she was awake, Ava would mumble about the dragon, ask if she was safe in the tower, whisper that she didn't want to play the princess game anymore. Thomas was still being allowed brief visits under strict supervision. He played the devastated, heartbroken father so convincingly. This morning, he cornered me in the hospital cafeteria, where no one else was around. His mask slipped for just a second. He leaned in and whispered, "You should have just stayed at work like you were supposed to. Some things you're not meant to see." Miguel is pushing hard for an emergency court order to cut off all contact between Thomas and Ava. He says her disclosures about the dragon and her behavior during the supervised visit are enough to raise serious red flags. But the legal system is slow, and Ava needs protection now. The doctors came in again today with more test results. The infection is getting worse, despite everything. They've brought in more specialists. They asked about any medications Ava might have had at home, any exposure to chemicals. I don't know what Thomas did. I don't know if this infection is connected to that, or just unthinkable timing. I can't even let myself write what I'm afraid of. I can't. An hour ago, her fever spiked again. She became delirious, thrashing in the hospital bed, crying out, screaming about the dragon, about the burning, about how... It hurts when Daddy makes her drink the special princess medicine. Those words chilled me. I begged the doctors to test for poisoning. They were hesitant, skeptical, but agreed to run a toxicology screen, just in case. The results just came back. Ava tested positive for ethylene glycol. Antifreeze. My 4-year-old daughter has antifreeze poisoning. The doctor said that if we had waited even one more day, it could have killed her. Thomas has vanished. After his last visit, he left, and no one's been able to find him since. The police are searching. Sophie brought me fresh clothes and stayed at the hospital with me for hours, holding my hand while I cried. Miguel is finalizing the emergency protective orders now. Michael, still visibly shaken, keeps saying there were no signs, no indication of abuse this extreme. Like that changes anything now. What kind of person poisons their own child? Was he trying to kill her? Make her just sick enough to play the concerned parent? Or was it all part of another twisted game? I haven't left Ava's bedside. I won't. Not for a second. Not even to use the bathroom unless Sophie or hospital staff I trust is watching her. I'm terrified Thomas will come back. The police searched our house. They found what they think is the delivery method. Hidden at the back of Ava's closet was her princess cup, filled with what looks like juice. Testing revealed residue from cleaning chemicals, likely antifreeze. It had been hidden out of her sight, but placed somewhere Thomas could reach easily. They're testing it now to confirm. Miguel says this changes everything. With proof of poisoning, Ava will get full protection. No judge in the world, he told me, will let Thomas anywhere near her again. When she's strong enough, we'll go stay with my parents until everything is settled. Edit. The police just called. They found Thomas at a bus station trying to leave town. He's in custody now, being questioned about the poisoning, the files, and everything else he's done to our daughter. Ava is asleep again. Peaceful. For the first time in what feels like forever. The antidote is working. The doctors are cautiously optimistic. They say children are resilient. That with the right support, They can recover from things that would break most adults. I want to believe them. I need to believe them. I need to believe I haven't lost my daughter, even though I've gotten her back. I need to believe we can piece something together again after all of this. If you're a parent reading this, please listen when your child tells you something is wrong. Even if they don't have the words, even if it sounds impossible, even if the person they're scared of is someone you love, someone you trust completely, don't make my mistake. Don't walk out the door while your child screams for you to stay, because sometimes the monster isn't under the bed or in the closet. Sometimes he's sitting next to you, smiling, planning how to destroy everything you love. 3 weeks since my last update. Ava's out of the hospital now. We're staying with my parents, 3 states away. We've got restraining orders in place. We're trying to rebuild something that even remotely resembles safety. Physically, Ava's recovery has been better than we hoped. Her kidneys are working almost normally again. The doctors keep saying children are amazing like that, resilient. I just wish their minds could heal as quickly. She still wakes up screaming, still checks under every bed, behind every door, still whispers about the dragon and the tower. She won't be alone in a room for even a second. Follows me into the bathroom, watches the door while I shower. Her therapist says that kind of hypervigilance is normal after trauma, that it could last months, maybe years. The truth about what Thomas did came out in pieces, each more horrific than the last. The princess game was just the start. The tower was our hallway closet, where he'd lock her while I worked nights. The dragon was what he called himself when he got angry. The special princess medicine was antifreeze mixed with juice. But that wasn't all. Police found videos on Thomas's laptop, dozens, all recorded on nights I was at work. All of them showed him terrorizing our daughter in ways so vile, I threw up when the detectives described it. He didn't sexually abuse her, thank God. But what he did was its own brand of torture, psychological torment. He would wake Ava up in the middle of the night, tell her monsters were coming, scratch on the walls, hide in the closet, jump out at her when she was almost asleep, force her to drink the special medicine, film her crying, in pain, from the burning in her throat. Other videos showed him locking her in the closet, the tower, telling her she had to be silent or the dragon would hear her, would burn her. He'd leave her in there for hours, sometimes all night. Bang on the door at random intervals to make her flinch, roar outside, open the door just to see her frozen in terror, and sometimes he'd be gentle, comfort her, stroke her hair, tell her everything was okay. Experts say that's how trauma bonding works. The abuser becomes both the source of fear and the only refuge from it. It creates a twisted emotional dependency. The most chilling footage showed him coaching her, making her practice what to say to me, rehearsing how to explain away her fear, making her beg me not to leave, but without explaining why, punishing her when she slipped up. Miguel says it's one of the most methodical, calculated cases of psychological abuse he's ever encountered. The prosecutor is going after the harshest charges possible: child abuse, attempted murder, torture. Thomas is being held without bail. They found other things too, searches on his laptop about poisoning symptoms, how to make someone appear mentally unstable, how to sabotage a custody case, how to edit home surveillance footage, how to send texts remotely from someone else's phone. They even found a document, some kind of plan. Step-by-step instructions on how to make me seem unfit while increasing Ava's dependence on him. It didn't state the goal outright, but it referenced the project and maintaining optimal conditions. We don't know what that means. We might never fully know. The hardest moment so far was the bail hearing. Listening to Thomas's attorney argue that he was a loving father who made some poor decisions, watching Thomas sit there looking remorseful, like he deserved sympathy, forgiveness. The judge wasn't fooled. He denied bail, called the evidence disturbing in the extreme, ordered a full psychological evaluation. My supervisor called to apologize, offered me my job back. I can't go back yet. Ava panics if I'm not in the same room. The worst moments are when she looks up at me with those big, searching eyes and asks, "Why did Daddy do that?" And I have no answer. She keeps asking what she did wrong to make him angry. Her therapist says that's common, kids blaming themselves. We tell Ava again and again that none of this was her fault, that Daddy was sick in his mind, that some people hurt others because something inside them is broken. But I don't think she believes us yet. I don't think she can make sense of how someone who was supposed to love her could hurt her so deliberately. Honestly, I still can't either. Her night terrors are getting worse. Last night, she woke up screaming that the dragon was in her room, that he was going to make her drink the burning medicine again. It took me over an hour to calm her down and remind her she was safe. Yesterday, I couldn't find her for almost 10 minutes. My heart stopped. Eventually, I discovered her curled up in my parents' hallway closet, eyes shut tight, body still. I asked her why she was hiding. She said she was practicing being quiet for when the dragon came back. Last week, I got a letter from Thomas, passed through his lawyer, so technically not in violation of the restraining order. Miguel told me not to read it, but I did. It was chilling in its normalcy. He asked how Ava was doing, said he was concerned about her recovery, hoped that I was healing too. Said he understood I was angry, but he hoped we could find a way forward. Not a single word about the abuse, the videos, the poisoning, like it never happened. The prosecutor told me this kind of compartmentalization is typical of psychopaths. The ability to separate their behavior into silos, disconnect actions from consequences. He said Thomas probably doesn't even see what he did as truly wrong. I keep turning it over in my head, trying to understand how I missed it, how I lived beside this man for years, had a child with him, never saw what was lurking underneath. My therapist says abusers like Thomas are skilled at hiding their real selves, that he might not have even planned this in the beginning, that sometimes they escalate only when the opportunity presents itself. Miguel called today. Thomas accepted a plea deal, multiple felony charges, 20 years minimum before he's eligible for parole, no contact with Ava or me, ever again. It means there won't be a trial. Ava won't have to testify. I should feel relieved, but mostly, I feel numb. 20 years doesn't feel like enough. Yesterday, Ava played with another child for the first time since everything happened. My cousin's daughter, about the same age. They colored together, built a blanket fort. She's starting to play again, to imagine again, to trust, just a little. That the world can be safe. That closets are just closets. That medicine helps. That bedtime stories don't have to involve towers and dragons. Last night, she asked if she could tell me a story before bed, instead of the other way around. I said yes. She told me a story about a little girl and her mommy who escaped a bad place and found a good one. She said they had to be very brave. But they did it. Together. She said the bad place was far away now, that it couldn't find them anymore. I sat there listening, heart in my throat, as my daughter gave herself a story where she had power, where we had power, where we got away, where safety wasn't just possible, but real. When she finished, she looked at me with those big eyes and asked, "That's us, right, Mommy? We got away from the bad place?" I held her hand and said, "Yes, baby. We got away. We're safe now. The bad place can't find us anymore." She nodded, content. Then she closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep, still holding my hand. And for the first time in months, she didn't wake up screaming.